Irene Kelly travels through parallel universes, repeatedly killing the man she believes murdered her daughter in her original reality. This existence is a cold, calculated vacuum where every minute is consumed by the absence of a child and the presence of a relentless, singular purpose. In a dimly lit motel room that smells of stale smoke and desperation, she obsessively studies impossible diagrams and complex equations on a glowing laptop screen. Her wall is a chaotic mosaic of maps and photos showing the same man from many angles, a target across the infinite. Irene discovered access points to parallel realities, learning to navigate the fractures in spacetime like stepping through a heavy, silent door. Her goal remains simple, destructive, and entirely obsessive: find her daughter's killer in every universe and end his life wherever he draws breath. Revenge has become her only compass, the only thing that tethers her to a world that otherwise feels like a hollow shell. Each jump takes her further from her own soul, and she understands deep down that there is no way back home. The first crossing she ever attempted was a violent and disorienting sensory assault that left her gasping for breath in a world that felt fundamentally wrong. The scenery shifted subtly, yet the very air felt different, charged with a strange electricity that hummed against her skin. Irene tracked her target with a meticulous, icy precision, eventually following him into a dark, rain-soaked alleyway that mirrored her own internal gloom. Without a single moment of hesitation, she pulled the trigger and watched him fall, waiting for the relief that she believed would follow. No relief came, only a familiar, gnawing emptiness that seemed to expand the moment his pulse finally stopped. She photographed the lifeless body as proof for her records before returning to the crossing point where the world folded in. Reappearing in the motel room, she added a grim black mark to the wall, a physical tally of her expanding rage. Another universe was erased by her vengeance, yet her daughter remained a ghost, unreachable and forever silent in the darkness. As the jumps multiply, the act of killing becomes a hollow routine that strips away the remnants of her humanity with every pull of the trigger. Irene sleeps little and eats less, her body becoming a gaunt vessel for a spirit that is slowly being consumed by its own hatred. Each version of the killer lives a drastically different life. Sometimes he is a loving father, sometimes a drifter, and sometimes a respected citizen. It changes nothing for her final decision, as she executes him, documents the deed, and vanishes back into the void between worlds. Her face grows harder with each passage, her features setting into a permanent mask of grim determination that scares even herself. Her hands begin to shake uncontrollably after the shots are fired, a physical rebellion against the violence she forces them to commit. Memories from 100 different worlds begin to blur into an incoherent mess inside her exhausted and fragmented mind. She no longer knows how many universes she has visited or how many men she has sent to the grave. In one specific world, a profound sense of wrongness settles over Irene the moment she arrives, chilling her to the very bone. The man she tracks behaves differently than all the others. He seems nervous, watched, and almost like a hunted animal in his own home. Irene hesitates for the first time in her long and bloody journey, pausing to observe him from the shadows of the street. She follows him longer than usual, eventually discovering that he is actively searching for a woman named Irene Kelly. The realization hits her like ice water, making her realize that in this particular universe, she has become the ultimate threat. Her reputation as a cross-reality executioner has crossed the borders of the multiverse like a long, dark shadow preceding her arrival. He knows her face before he has ever seen her in the flesh, and the cycle of vengeance begins to crack under the weight. Doubt enters her absolute certainty for the first time, making her question the divine right of her mission. She decides not to shoot this time, choosing instead to watch from a distance as he returns home, his entire body trembling with fear. Local newspapers in this reality mention a mysterious woman committing ritualistic killings across different worlds, confirming her worst fears. Irene understands that her actions now precede her, leaving a trail of blood and terror that warns her targets before she arrives. These universes are no longer untouched or innocent, they carry the permanent, jagged traces of her insatiable vengeance. She is no longer just a grieving mother seeking a warped form of justice, she has transformed into a terrifying, multiversal legend. The line between a mother's justice and a predator's madness has faded into a gray area that she can no longer navigate. Her mission has lost its crystalline clarity, replaced by a muddy, suffocating sense of guilt that she cannot easily wash away. She fears what she has become in the eyes of the infinite, yet the pain of her original loss remains. Back in the quiet motel room of her home reality, she finds another Irene Kelly waiting for her, sitting in the lone chair. This version is older, more exhausted, and her eyes are full of a knowing sorrow that Irene recognizes as her own future. The other Irene explains that the cycle has no end and that each killing only serves to widen the fracture between the worlds. All versions of Irene across the multiverse are being pulled toward the same dark obsession, trapped in a loop of grief. They look at each other like broken mirrors, reflecting a tragedy that has been amplified 1,000 times over by their rage. The other Irene shows deep physical and mental scars from the journey, revealing that she tried to stop many times but could not. They realize they are trapped by a grief that has become its own sentient, hungry entity, feeding on their lives. The real enemy may no longer be the killer who started this, but the destructive spiral they created in their own image. Still, Irene jumps once more, seeking a final, ultimate truth that might justify the blood already on her hands. In this next universe, the man is surprisingly waiting for her, armed and prepared, yet he remains strangely, terrifyingly calm. He tells her that many versions of Irene Kelly have already come to this house and tried to kill him for a crime he didn't commit. He claims that in this specific world, her daughter died in an accident and he had absolutely nothing to do with it. The absolute logic of her revenge collapses beneath her feet, leaving her standing in a vacuum of her own making. She understands that she may have killed innocent men in her blind quest, imposing the same sentence on everyone who shared a face. The guilt becomes an unbearable weight that crushes the breath from her lungs and makes her weapon feel like lead. Her mission has turned into a recursive nightmare where she is both the judge and the monster of the story. They sit and talk in a quiet, sunlit room for a long time, the tension slowly draining out of the space between them. He tells her about his life, his own fears, and the daughter he is trying to raise in a world that feels increasingly dangerous. Irene sees a human being before her, not a monster or a target, and she finally grasps the scale of her catastrophic mistakes. Each universe holds its own unique truth, yet she imposed a singular, violent sentence everywhere without regard for the context. Her revenge surpassed any concept of justice long ago, becoming a blind, blunt instrument of destruction that she cannot justify. She breaks down in tears, the first she has shed in years that aren't fueled by anger, as the weight of her actions crashes over her. She cannot undo the lives she has taken or the world she has scarred with her presence and her gun. But she can choose what happens in the next minute, and she chooses to lower her weapon for the very last time. Returning to her original reality, she meets the other Irene again and declares with a newfound, shaky voice that she will stop. Breaking the cycle is the only way to save what is left of her soul and prevent more versions of herself from falling. Together, they begin to systematically destroy the crossing device that has been both her salvation and her curse for so long. Screens shatter, hard drives are crushed, and the impossible equations are wiped from the motel walls in a flurry of activity. The fracture between the worlds closes with a heavy, definitive sound that echoes like a prison door finally locking from the outside. Irene feels a sudden, sharp fear at the prospect of staying in just one world, with no more escapes into other realities. There is no longer a way to run from her memories or to try and correct her past actions through more violence. She must live with her choices now, standing still in the wreckage of the life she chose to pursue. Days pass with an unfamiliar, heavy slowness that forces her to confront the quiet of her own mind without the noise of the jump. Irene finally leaves the motel room for good, walking out into a city she barely noticed during her years of obsessive hunting. People on the street seem ordinary, fragile, and intensely alive in a way she had forgotten was possible. She breathes in air that is no longer filled with the static of the multiverse or the metallic tang of escape. The pain of her daughter's loss remains a constant presence, but it begins to change shape, shifting into something manageable. It is no longer fueled by the white-hot rage that required blood to be cooled, it becomes a deep, permanent scar. Revenge had frozen her in a single, terrible moment of time, but now the clock begins to move forward again. She has no more targets to track and no more tally marks to add to a wall, leaving her only with herself. In the final scene of the film, she sits on a wooden bench in a quiet, sprawling city park as the day ends. Children play in the distance, their laughter carrying on the breeze and filling the air with a sound that used to hurt her. Irene watches them with a new, fragile softness, thinking of her own daughter without the usual fire of 1,000 suns. The world remains an imperfect, often cruel place, but she accepts that it is real and that she belongs to it. She accepts that she cannot fix the past or bring back what was taken, no matter how many worlds she bleeds, but she can still choose who she becomes in the aftermath, a woman defined by her survival rather than her kills. The sun sets slowly behind the trees, casting long shadows that she no longer feels the need to hide within. The silence that surrounds her is no longer a threatening void, it is simply human and finally, blessedly quiet. The film ends on this fragile piece, with Irene Kelly finally standing still in a single universe, her journey through the infinite over. Michaela McManus stars as Irene Kelly, alongside Stella Marcus as Mia and Jeremy Holm as Neville, in this story of grief and multiversal vengeance. Directed by Kevin and Matthew McManus, the narrative explores the fine line between revenge and losing one's humanity. As she looks out at the park, the audience sees a woman who has traveled further than anyone to find peace, only to find it within herself. The black tally marks on the motel wall are gone, replaced by the simple, everyday reality of a world moving forward. She is no longer the redux of her own tragedy, but a person starting a new, difficult chapter. The cycle is broken, the portals are closed, and the silence of the park is all that remains. Irene Kelly is home, and for the first time in a very long time, she is not looking for a way out.